All right, so we've covered it's real and urgent, we've covered it's our fault, we've covered if we take immediate action, we can remedy it. Finally, I'd like to ask each of you to talk about the statement that it is settled science. Lord Monckton.
This is another NUM question. Is it settled science? No, of course it's not. Or as they say in the Bronx, settled, schmeddled. Fact is, they screwed up their physics, and this is going to astonish you. And my team has been working on this for the last 2 or 3 years, and we're just polishing off the final stages of this. As we've already seen, predicted warming is 2.4 times the warming that their own data for radiative forcing caused by man and the radiative imbalance would lead them to expect. Now, most of their predicted warming comes from what is called the feedback response. The direct warming is that 1 Kelvin on the left, and all the rest is feedback response. You'll see the models and the IPCC reckon that it's about multiplying the direct warming by 3, and some of the sillier extreme papers by the climate communists multiply it by up to 10. So there appears to be a crisis because of the silly papers. But actually, as we'll see, those extreme forecasts are based on this material misdefinition of what a climate feedback actually is. And they say it's a perturbation in one climate quantity causing a change in another, which in turn causes that one to change, which is a piece of gobbledygook. What they've left out is that feedback does not only respond to changes in temperature, it responds to the entire temperature that happens to exist at any given moment. The feedback loop in the climate is an inanimate object. It cannot say, ooh, I'm going to respond only to this bit of the temperature that I sense exists. It has to respond to the entire temperature. And yet if you say that to just about any climatologist, they say, no, 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 feedback only responds to changes in temperature. They forgot the sunshine. Because the sunshine, even if there were no greenhouse gases and before any feedbacks, the temperature on Earth, according to their figures, would be 255 Kelvin. And that engenders quite a large feedback response. But they attribute all of that large feedback response to the mere 10.3 Kelvin of additional greenhouse gas warming from the naturally occurring non-condensing greenhouse gases that were present in the atmosphere in 1850. The natural greenhouse effect is about 33 Kelvin. You can see how it's calculated here. You take the actual temperature as it was measured in 1850, you deduct the emission temperature, and the difference is the natural greenhouse effect. Now, warming from the naturally occurring non-condensing greenhouse gases present in the air in 1850, including the feedback response, comes to 33 Kelvin. And what that means is there was no feedback response to that great big 255 Kelvin emission temperature in the current mid-range estimates that are being relied upon by official climatology. They forgot the sun was shining. As you can see, here it is, no feedback response at all to the emission temperature from the fact that the sun is shining, except, of course, in Scotland. And that in response to the tiny natural greenhouse gas warming to 1850, only 10 Kelvin, or 1/25th of the emission temperature, suddenly that on its own produces 23 Kelvin of feedback response. That's how they get to multiply by 3 the direct warming from greenhouse gases and pretend we're going to get 3.35 Kelvin of warming per doubling of CO2. Well, no, we're not, because they screwed up. They got it wrong. If you see here how they do it, they forget to include the emission temperature together with the natural greenhouse gas warming up to 1850 and the man-made greenhouse gas warming of only 1 Kelvin after 1850. They only feed the natural and man-made greenhouse gas warming into the feedback loop. They forget that the emission temperature is responsible for nearly all of the feedbacks that they are blaming on greenhouse gases. Here is the corrected diagram. This is what's known as a block diagram, and there are some control engineers here because it was from control theory that these block diagrams were borrowed, and this methodology of feedback was borrowed. But the climatologists whose knuckles drag along the ground had not understood what they had borrowed. They had screwed up comprehensively. Now, would any control engineer like to stand up and say, am I right or am I right? Well, the answer is yes, I'm right. And here you can see that if you give the thickness of the lines, depending on the magnitude of the temperature concerned, you can see that nearly all of it is the pale yellow from the sun, and then the bright yellow just above that on the right, that's the feedback caused by the warming from the sun, and just above that is everything else. That's how small the effect that we can possibly have is. A lot of that is natural, only a tiny bit of that is us. So the corrected warming from doubled CO2, once you correct their enormous error of physics, is not 3.35 Kelvin, it's not even the 1.4 Kelvin we calculated earlier from their own data. It's just 1.15 Kelvin, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the climate problem. They can no longer pretend that global warming is a problem because the whole global warming scare is predicated upon this one mistake. They got it wrong, they screwed up, global warming isn't a problem. The corrected figures show just 1.16 Celsius of global warming per doubling of CO2. That, ladies and gentlemen, is not enough to be a problem. And so it's game over.
Now that's settled science right there. Settled science to me is water freezes at 32 unless it's polluted or something, or there's gravity. The sun's hot. That's settled science. So I'm not going to argue with that. One of the big problems I think climatologists have is they don't forecast. So there's no bottom line to anything, right? My business, I'm in the private sector. If I'm not right, I'm going to get fired. All right, even. Sometimes if I am right, I get fired because of the economy. But the point of the matter is, and I love this stuff. I love to compete. I mean, I wasn't a real good wrestler, but, I'm doing what God made me to do, and I'm going to do it as hard as I can until I get pulled off the field. And it has nothing to do with trying to put this person down or that person down. It's simply a guy that wants to stand up and say, this is what I believe. You don't have to believe me. Go look at what you want to go look at, but at least look at the other side of the issue. So I don't have any, and I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer here. The science is not settled, obviously, except Lord Monckton's is. I will take his side of the argument there. But unfortunately, I believe the solution to all this is settled, all right? I don't think there's any stopping the tide that's coming. It's almost like sometimes I feel if you're going to try to debate this, you're William Travis at the Alamo, right? And yet he still stood because that's what he does, all right? You do what you're made to do, okay? But don't sit there, I don't sit there and think, oh, God, please help me win this battle or that battle. I'm nobody's hero, all right? I'm someone that worships my Heavenly Father, and I'm amazed every day. I'm amazed more at the design of the system. You realize, Eric Liddell said if you saw the movie Chariots of Fire, he said, God made me fast and I feel his pleasure when I run. If you remember that. That was a great line, all right? And that guy, the way he won his gold medal was lights out. He said, I ran half the race on me, and then the other half God took over like that. Well, God made me to love the weather, and every day I see his majesty. So the infinite power of the weather and the power of the atmosphere and the fact that it can do things and do them very, very quickly, right, renders the increase of 1 molecule of CO2 out of every 10,000 molecules of air over a 100-year period very, very, very tiny. If I say it's 0, well, but you have to be able, I've always said that I'm the dumbest man in the room. And my dad says, don't say that. And I'm like, no, I'm dumber. Well, you know why? If you're the dumbest man in the room and you truly want to get smarter, you see everything. There was no wrestler I ever met at Penn State that was worse than me when they walked on. But I improved quite a bit because I wanted to improve, right? And I was the worst guy on the team, so I did more to look at. Now, again, I call it the curse of talent. I see a lot with athletes. They're so darn good that they don't know what to do when confronted with a situation that they've never seen before because they're always winding up winning. If you are a top-level climatologist that's never forecast the weather and understands attribution to different factors, you're naturally going to jump on the only thing you believe, which in this case is CO2. The weather teaches you that. Now, I'm going to go over this real quick. This is a practical example of why the hysteria over hurricanes, and we got hurricane season coming up, and anything that happens is going to be blamed on. But the practical example related to hurricanes, typhoons, is if you look at, for instance, the increase in water vapor between 2005 to 2017 in the winter. Now, I want you to look up in the Arctic and look over the tropics, okay? There's an increase of water vapor over the Arctic, but the tropics are far more impressive with the increase of water vapor. And this is 1,000 millibars, so it's right near the surface. Yet, where is all the warming? Why isn't it warming? Okay, why isn't it warming in the tropics? It's warming in the Arctic. And look at that. See that purple dinosaur, this Barney up there north of Scandinavia. Look where the warming shows up. And it's because of saturation mixing ratios. If you understand what water vapor is about, look what happens between 0.12 and 0.21. The atmosphere has a 10-degree difference there. But you get into the tropics, and you need an increase of 100 grams to cause the kind of warming that's going on. So what's happened here, and this is what's glorious, the trapping hot spots over the tropics, they're all going the other way. It's drying out. So what happens when it dries out? It means a lower wet bulb temperature. That's why hurricanes have not increased dramatically. All right? Because what happens is you're distorting the natural pattern of the earth, and that changes everything. But that is where we're supposed to be seeing all this water vapor, because you get water vapor of 400 millibars over the tropics. What's that going to do? That's going to trap more heat. The other thing I want to bring up real quick, too, is what happened to the permadrought? You guys remember 2013, after those 3 hot summers? The plains were supposed to be in a permadrought, California permadrought. It reverses dramatically. It was especially hideous in 2012 when they were saying that this was going on, and all it did was mimic 52 through 54 in Texas, and then reversed by 57. Now, I know a lot about 1954 in Texas because I said an Aggie fan, and that was the year of the Junction Boys down there. This is from Dr. Ryan Maui, okay? There's no increase in major hurricane frequency. Globally, it looks cyclical, again, from Dr. Maui. No increase in frequency. You could get on Ryan's site and you can see a bunch of this stuff. 30s, 40s, and 50s were far worse. Are you kidding me? Look at the 1940s. Remember that old joke? That old joke about, hey, if you believe that, I'll sell you some swampland in Florida. That was back. That's the reason why Florida used to get hit. People go, oh, well, the atmosphere will teach Trump a lesson. We'll flood Mar-a-Lago. I'd be saying, yeah, you're right. You're right. And then you got the 1950s, okay? And, I wasn't put to bed with the story of the 3 little bears. I was put to bed with the story of the 3 big hurricanes, Carol, Edna, and Hazel. My time has expired, but let me do my conclusion here, all right? You know what? If I could have wrestled the way I talk, I would have been a national champion. Man can do nothing to stop planetary cycles. The people pushing the climate emergency apparently are against a better life, more liberty, and greater chance to pursue happiness. 3, it gives me a chance. I'm very thankful for people on the other side. I have gratitude to everything because there's light in people. I don't care who you are, you got light in you. I believe that type of thing. But when they say what they say, it gives us a chance to say, well, look at this, 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 and this. So there's a chance to do that. As far as the models, they're great tools to add to the building of science, but put the wrong tool in the wrong person's hand and the results are not going to be positive, okay? No one would want to see me try to build a house, put it that way. Okay, that's that for now. Keep forgetting my phone.
Croc TV.